So if you told me a few years ago I'd be able to make images like this with my iPhone, I would not have believed you. But as iPhones have gotten better, I've been able to take my 10 years of photography experience, apply it to these phones, and make these types of images. So today I'm going to break down exactly what I do with my iPhone to achieve a high level result, and we're going to break this video down into 4 sections. Section 1, we're going to cover settings in your actual phone. Section 2, we're going to go over applications, which ones make sense, which ones don't make sense, and which ones you need. Section 3 is going to go over accessories and hardware to help you get a better result. And section 4, we're going to cover photo editing. Now let's get into it, and big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. So the first thing we have to do is go into our settings and scroll down to camera. Now I'm going to focus on what I think is crucial and important for this video. There are a lot of settings you can experiment with on your own. For example, system settings, I just leave them as default, but maybe you're someone who wants to turn on lock focus and exposure or play around with that. Same thing with photo styles. Personally, I just use standard. There are some cool photo styles in here. If you're someone who wants to mess with them, you can, but because we're going to be shooting in RAW files primarily, these photo styles don't really matter. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out and go down to formats. Now in formats, the first thing you see is camera capture. I keep this on high efficiency. Then we have photo capture, which you can pick between 12 and 24 megapixels. I just go with 24. The big thing you want to check is making sure that ProRAW and resolution control is turned on. This is a very important setting to make sure you have toggled on so you can get access to all the data for your photos, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, the next thing we have to do is make sure our ProRAW format is set to the proper settings. Now, there's no right or wrong way to do this. If you're someone who doesn't care about your phone storage, you can just set this to JPEG lossless most compatible, and you're going to have files that are extremely large that take up a lot of space on your phone. If you're someone who's more cognizant of storage, which I think we all are because iCloud is always trying to charge us more money, you can use JPEG XL Lossy, which is going to compress the size of the photo, but it's going to keep the resolution of the cameras at 48 megapixels. So personally, I use JPEG XL Lossy. There's no right or wrong answer here. It just comes down to storage. Now from there, we can go ahead and jump out of formats and we can get back to our camera settings. Now the next thing you want to do is go down to preserve settings. Now this is something that you don't think is a big deal, but if you're making a lot of pictures and you're setting your camera a certain way, it can become a little bit annoying to constantly have to reset your settings. So what I like to do is, one, make sure that camera mode is selected as on. This means if you're making photos, it's going to default back to photo. If you switch over to video, it's going to default back to video. Personally, this works well for me because I might be making a lot of video clips with my phone and I want to just open it and have it in video. If you're someone who primarily is using photos, photos will be the default. So if you turn this off, it's not really a big deal. The next thing I make sure to keep on is ProRAW and resolution control down at the bottom. I make sure this is turned on so when I set my camera to RAW formatting, it stays in RAW formatting every time I open the camera, and I'm not having to switch back and forth every time, especially in scenarios where maybe the photo is really fast and I just want to get the picture. Switching to RAW takes up a little bit of time. The last thing I make sure to turn on, which is a personal preference, is I make sure that live photo is toggled on. Because I turn live photo off, I just want it to stay off. I don't want there to be a scenario where live photo pops on, I make a picture, and all of a sudden I have this live image. So we can jump out of preserve settings and we can swipe down to composition. Now in composition, you're essentially able to turn on and off different tools to help you make a more informed image. Now you can turn on grid to get grid lines. Personally, I've been turning this off lately just because it seems a little messy on the screen. It's not necessary for me, but if you're someone learning photography, this could help you. I turn on level though. Level helps me make sure my horizon and lines are straight and I can make sure the camera is upright. This just saves me a lot of time in editing. You can also turn on or off front mirror camera, view outside the frame. I leave those off, but when I select indicators, I make sure to turn on flash and live photo as indicators. This allows me to get a flash icon and a live photo icon when I'm making pictures. And I personally just like to see this in the top right just to make sure I don't have live photo or flash turned on by accident. Now once we get out of indicators, we're going to swipe down a little bit more. Now everything is toggled on by default by Apple when you get the phone. Portraits in photo mode. If you keep this on, you can change your photo to portrait mode. I keep that on. One thing I turn off is prioritize faster shooting. This is a little bit conspiratorial. I don't have a lot of evidence to back this up, but in my opinion and the research I've done, people claim that by turning this off, you get a little bit of a bump in the quality of your image. So I like to turn it off. If you're someone who's making a ton of photos, like it's your kid's birthday party or something, you probably want to turn that on just to make sure you can get your shots. But if you're in a more controlled environment, like you're doing landscape photos, you could turn this off and maybe get that little bit of conspiracy theory edge that people talk about. And that's really everything we have to go over in settings. So now we can jump out of settings and we can jump into our camera. And what I want you to do in your camera is go ahead and change your format in the top left from HEIC to RAW 48 megapixels. This is going to allow you to capture a RAW file with your iPhone. Now, a RAW file is a different format than an HEIC or a JPEG. A RAW file will be a DNG file. A DNG file is going to contain all of the data that your iPhone sensor is seeing. This is going to allow you to get results like I showed at the beginning of the video for a number of reasons. One, a RAW file is going to have less of the digital processing that happens with an iPhone. You're able to remove a little bit of that digitization and a little bit of that software-y look. Also, a RAW file is going to allow you to process the image based on data, meaning you can change things like your white balance in post-processing, you can change things like your dynamic range, bringing up your shadows, much easier than you can with an HEIC or a JPEG image. Now, we're going to get into how to process RAW files and use Apple ProRAW and Lightroom Mobile a little bit later in the video. For now, I just want you to understand that switching to RAW is going to give you a higher quality image and an image that's much easier to use if you're looking to get high quality photos like this. Now, speaking of Lightroom Mobile, the second thing we have to talk about is which applications do you need on your iPhone to get high quality photos. In my opinion, this is a big misconception amongst a lot of people looking to make really good images with their phone. They think they need some fancy app that they have to pay money for every year, when in reality, you don't. Now, I'm considering making a separate video on this because it's a topic that could be 15 minutes long, so I'm going to condense it in this video. But some of the popular apps out there are things like Halide, the Moment Camera app, which I've used before, things like Pro Camera, and even Adobe is working on their own camera app called Project Indigo. Personally, with each one of these applications, I think they're only necessary if you're someone making photos in JPEG and you want to create images that are stylized without doing any post-processing. With an app like Halide, you have the ability to do something called zero processing, which essentially allows you to make a JPEG photo that doesn't have all the computational photography applied to it. So if you're someone who wants to stylize your JPEG photos, you can pay the money for an app like this. But personally, I find it much easier to just go ahead and use RAW files with the native camera on your iPhone and then use a free app like Lightroom Mobile to process your images. Lightroom Mobile by Adobe is completely free for basic users. There is a premium plan that you can pay for, but you'll see when we go over how to edit your photos in this video, it's not necessary to pay for these features unless you're trying to take your photos a little bit higher and get into more advanced photo editing. For most basic beginners, the free version of Lightroom paired with the camera app in your iPhone and switching it over to ProRAW is all you need to get stellar images. You do not need to pay for one of these apps that's going to cost you $20 a year. Now, one other argument people make for these applications is that you get more control over your camera. Personally, when it comes to photography, I think all you need to do is press on your screen and adjust your exposure in the native camera app, and you will get a result that is fine. Because iPhones don't have a varied aperture, you're really only changing your shutter speed when you make adjustments in these applications. Personally, I think if you're using an app that allows you to adjust your settings, it's much more important to use something like that when it comes to video, and it's less important with photography. So now we're on to the third topic in this video, which is iPhone accessories. And personally, I think this is one of the most underrated ways to improve your iPhone images. Now, before I can talk about that, I briefly want to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is who I use for my website, evanranf.com, and on evanranf.com, I sell my photo book, Memento. I'm actually working on my next photo book as well. Now, in both of these books, there are images created with an iPhone. 10 years ago, if you told me I'd be able to include an iPhone image alongside all my mirrorless photos in a body of work, I would not have believed you. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you're someone who's using your iPhone and you're creating high quality images, you now have the ability to make money and a career for yourself with your smartphone. And if you're someone looking to take your creativity to the next level, no one makes it easier than Squarespace. Squarespace has their award-winning drag and drop templates that everyone knows about, but they've recently introduced AI tools to make the website building process even easier for you. On top of that, Squarespace allows you to do things like sell a course. If you want to sell the information that you have about your iPhone photos, you can do that with ease on Squarespace. You can also sell things like me, photo books, presets, prints that you make with your iPhone. You can even connect with your audience through a newsletter or a blog, and you have email marketing tools to help you connect with your audience outside of social media. On top of that, Squarespace has introduced Squarespace Payments, which makes payment processing so simple. You no longer need a third party. You can accept all your payments through Squarespace. So if you're someone looking to take your creativity to the next level, even if you're only using an iPhone, Squarespace is the way to do that. So head over to squarespace.com/EvanRamp to start a free trial, build yourself a trial site, and when you're ready to sign up, use code EvanRamp to save 10% at checkout. That's squarespace.com/EvanRamp to start a free trial and use code EvanRamp to save 10% at checkout. Big shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. So back to camera accessories. This right here is the Polar Pro Light Chaser case. Now this case allows you to easily mount different filters to your iPhone by just sliding them on. Now, the reason I believe this is so underrated and something that can immediately elevate your iPhone photos is because as a professional photographer for the last 10 years, nearly every time I go out to make pictures, I put some type of filter on my camera lens. When I'm in a situation where I have a lot of ambient lighting or I want to soften up my images, I use this Pro Mist filter. When I'm in a situation that's bright and there's a lot of glare in my photos, I will use a polarizing filter, and these filters impact my images in a positive way. They help the photos look better regardless of what I do in editing. And that same concept applies to iPhone photos, but unfortunately most people overlook it just because they don't know. So with a polarizing filter, that is the best place to start in making your iPhone images just look a little bit better. You can take a lot of the glare out of your photos, and with something like a Pro Mist filter, you can get those nice glowy night images. And with products like this from Polar Pro or other ones out there, it's so easy to mount these to your phone, and it's really not that intrusive. I did a test of this over the summer where I took it on a trip with me and only shot photos with the iPhone, and I kept a filter on the entire time, and it really wasn't that inconvenient. The camera or phone just fit right in my pocket like it normally would. Now, if you're someone who doesn't want to spend the money on a phone case or you think it's annoying, try out taking a standard camera filter if you have one laying around and just put it in front of your camera. Obviously, you're going to have to remove this to do that, but this will work as well. I've made a lot of great images just holding up a Pro Mist filter in front of my camera and getting that bloom effect. So don't overlook the power of different accessories out there. Some of them, yes, are a ripoff. I made a video about iPhone camera lenses and how I only recommended the fisheye. Things like anamorphic lenses didn't really work well for me. Things like super zoom telephoto lenses for your iPhone didn't work very well. So it's not always going to be something that helps, but in my opinion, camera filters on your iPhone works every time, and it's an easy way to elevate your images. So now we're on to editing our photos in Lightroom Mobile. Now I'm going to show you how I edit my photos and how I process them and the techniques that I use to get my edits, but I also want to mention that if you want to fast track this and copy my edits and learn from me directly, you can check out Simplifying Smartphone Photo Editing on moderncreativemoney.com. It's the second link in the description down below. Included with that course, which is about an hour long, there are 10 presets that will quickly give you the ability to edit your images in a number of different ways. Like this photo right here, we just slap on MCM Mobile Preset 9 and the image has a great look to it and it's ready to go to post on social media. So I definitely recommend checking that out. I'll show some more examples of this later. It's designed to help you get the most out of your images and also edit your photos much quicker than having to manually do it like I'm about to show you. So let's jump back into our device settings right here. Device is what you want to select in the bottom left so you can pick the images that you want to edit. Now, when you're editing a photo in Lightroom Mobile, you want to look for DNG in the top right. DNG lets you know it's a ProRAW image. Now, if you have a photo that's a JPEG or a different format, you can still edit in Lightroom Mobile. It doesn't mean the photo is not compatible. RAW files just is going to give you more data and make the photo easier to edit and give you a better result. So let's jump into one photo right here, and I'm going to break down my typical process. Now, with this photo, let's say I wanted to post this in my Instagram story. The first thing I'm going to do is go to crop in the bottom of our frame. Now from here, I'm going to click on this 3x4 on the left and select 16:9 because that is the standard crop for an Instagram story. So once I have that crop selected, I'm going to go ahead and click the checkbox. Now you can pick other aspect ratios if you want. You can flip the crop with this arrow tool up in the top left, but for now we're going to stick with that. So hit the check mark, we're good to go on our crop. Now from here, what I would do is go over to edit. I would select edit, and the first thing I would do is go to light, which is the first thing on the left. Now from here, I would go in and probably add in a little bit of contrast. With lighting, you can change things like your highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, and it's one of the main benefits to RAW files, you having the ability to manipulate the dynamic range of your camera sensor a little bit more. So with this image, I would bring down my shadows, I would bring down my blacks as well, and maybe boost up my highlights just slightly. Now you can see a before and after of your edits by holding down on the screen to get an idea of how you've manipulated the photo. Now, one more thing worth mentioning in the light panel is this HDR setting on the top left. HDR is going to allow for a high dynamic range in your photo. This is typically going to brighten up your highlights and make your image a little bit more punchy. This can be great for social media, but be cautious. You can't read these photos everywhere. If you're going to print an HDR photo, it's obviously not going to show up on the printer because HDR is optimized for a screen. So make sure if you're using this setting that you're posting the images or sharing them in a place where it's compatible. Now, the next thing that I typically would do is go into my curves. Curves is located in the top right of this light panel, and from here I would drop on a few points on this tone curve. Now, the tone curve is going to allow you to manipulate different quadrants of light in your image. So when we're down here, we can adjust our shadows. When we're up here, we can adjust our highlights. So for this basic example, I'm just going to use a typical S curve, which is going to add a nice bit of contrast into our shot. Now, you can do the same things with your reds, green, and blue channels. So if we drop points in here, you're going to adjust your blues in the highlights up here. Notice how if we go way up, they're more blue. If we go down here, they're a little bit more yellowish. Personally, I like the look of the blue, so I'm going to bring this up. Slide this up slightly. I'm going to bring these shadows down a little bit here, and notice how if we bring this S curve way down here, we're adding a lot of yellow into our shadows, and if we go up here, we're adding a lot of blue in. I'm just going to go with a very subtle blue. Do the same thing with the greens here. This is something pretty advanced, but I do want to show you this is how you get a very stylized look to your iPhone photos and how you can create your own style. So I'm just going to breeze through this really quick. I'm going to add a little bit more of a curve in here. It's a little bit too magenta in my opinion, so I'm going to bring that down. And last, I'm going to go over to red, and I'm going to try to balance this out a little bit with this red adjustment. Let's see what I can do here. That looks okay. We can go in and fine tune this a little bit more, but for the sake of example, let's just go ahead and call this tone curve done. So now you can see that there's been a big change to our photo. Now, if you're someone who wants to save this and apply it to a later image, all you would do is go up to these three dots in the right, select them, hit create preset, and save this under user presets. Now personally, I like to remove the Apple ProRAW profile from this just because when you remove that, you can apply this to any other photo. If it's shot on a Google phone or a Samsung or even your mirrorless camera, you'll now have it compatible. If you keep Apple ProRAW on, it's only going to work on other iPhone images. Now from here, you can save this as tone curve 1. It will save under user presets once you hit that checkbox, so you can go down there and you can select tone curve 1 the next time you want to edit, and it will be applied to your photo right away. Now the next thing I would do on a photo like this is jump into my color, which is next to light. Now from here, one of the other benefits to RAW files is the fact that you can adjust your white balance. So white balance is one of the keys, especially to things like tone curves and presets. If you have a dialed in white balance, you can find the perfect sweet spot for those tone curves and things that you've saved. So with this image, when we adjust our tone curve a little bit towards the cool side, I think that tone curve works a little bit better, and we can adjust our tint as well more towards the magenta side a little bit. Now we can jump down to vibrance and saturation, which is going to allow us to bring more color into our photo. Now, vibrance is primarily going to impact most of the image, but it's going to leave your highlights intact and not add color to them, whereas saturation is going to add color everywhere. Notice how when we bring our saturation all the way up, the yellows in our parking lot, which are highlights, are very yellow. I wouldn't want to bring the saturation that high anyways, but when we bring the vibrance up, notice how the parking lot isn't as yellow. That's because vibrance is more intelligent and doesn't impact your highlights as much. So with this image, I would do a little bit on the vibrance and a little less on saturation. Now, two other things that you can do with your edit is jump up to grading and color mix. Now, color mix allows you to select specific color channels and make changes to them. So with this image, we have a lot of red happening and it's kind of on the pink side. So what we can do is either jump down to our red channel and we can adjust the hue to our red and maybe make it a little more orange. We can also adjust the saturation on this and the luminance, making it lighter or darker. I think bringing it down a little bit helps us out. Now that's our before and after, and I think this image looks great. We can also go ahead and click this target tool and we can select specific colors in our image and then slide our finger up and down to change the hue, saturation, and luminance. So if we want to change this blue, we can do that by going through each one of these different selections and just moving our finger up and down. So I think that looks very good. Let's do a before and after. Very solid. Now, one last thing you can do is go to color grading. This is a little bit more advanced and it's something that I won't even be able to perfect in this image right away because it takes so much time, but I do want to show you how it works. Color grading allows you to add specific colors into areas of your photo. So this is our shadow selection right here. So notice how when we bring this red in, all of our shadow areas now have red. And if we move this around, different colors will appear in those shadows. We can do the same thing to our midtones if we would like, and we can do the same things to our highlights if you would like. This is one way to add a lot of style to your particular image, and it's how a lot of people get more of a film type look to their iPhone images. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank because like I said, it's very advanced. Now, the next things that I use in Lightroom Mobile are the effects and the details slider. So with effects, when we click on effects, we have things like vignette, which allows you to add some vignetting to the corners of your image. With vignetting, I recommend sometimes adding a little bit to your photo just to make it seem like something from a normal camera. With iPhone photos, they're sharp corner to corner and the exposure is usually perfect. So sometimes adding that vignette in makes it feel a little bit more natural because most camera lenses have vignette. You also have your effects over here, which have things like clarity and texture. Texture, sometimes I like to bring down a little bit just to take some of the digitization out of the photo, but you can decide if you want to use that. Texture is going to obviously add texture to your shot, and dehaze down here typically adds a lot of contrast into your photo. I personally never use dehaze. It's not something I like, but you can experiment with it. And then you have grain over here, which obviously allows you to add grain in if you're someone who was messing around with that color grading and you have more of a film look. You can add some grain in to add to that film effect. Now, the last thing that I use is the detail tab. Now, the detail tab is by default going to sharpen your photo. It's going to sharpen it to 50, which typically looks fine. One thing you can do though is you can hold your finger down on the screen and then you can slide this mask slider around. This is going to allow you to mask your sharpening, so anything that is white will be sharpened. Notice how in this photo, when we have that mask very low, things like our parking lot are being sharpened, which we don't need. So if we slide this up, we can sharpen the areas of the photo that we want to be sharpened without adding extra noise and grain into our shot. Now, when we slide back up, you also have noise reduction here. You could add a little bit of noise reduction if you want. This is great for night photos and images that might be a little bit more grainy, or if you've done a very hardcore edit on your photo with a lot of manipulation, adding in some noise reduction can help smooth out that image. Same with color noise. Color noise is set to 25 typically, and for me, I just leave it there for the most part. Now, all that right there is the main things that I would use in the free version of Lightroom Mobile, and that's the reason why I love this free version so much. It has everything that you could need. The fact that you can create your own presets, save them for later, you can do all of these more advanced editing things with a free program makes it a no-brainer. You don't need these fancy apps for the most part. Now, when you're ready to save this photo, you just go up to the box with an arrow and you'll save it to your device and you're ready to go to post it on social media. Now, the reason I created Simplifying Smartphone Photo Editing on moderncreativemoney.com is so you don't have to do this every single time. With the presets that come with that program, you can access them, just click it, and now you have a one-click edit on a photo like this that, in my opinion, looks great and it looks better than the original edit. So I would just go to the square up here with the arrow and save it, and notice how much faster that was. So definitely check that out. Second link in the description down below. I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped you out. If it did, hit the thumbs up button, consider subscribing to the channel, maybe leave a comment letting me know if it did help you. It means a lot to me. I'll catch y'all in the next one.